Well, why don't we get started? I see Joanne is having a lot of difficulties trying to get into the session today. So I don't know if Ruth Ann is capable of helping her. I just don't know.
It's a sound issue on her computer. She has the telephone number to call in, so she can. So
Okay. Okay. Well, why don't we get started with today? I hopefully will have some participation from Bruce, Norman, and Mary. We'll just have to wait and see. We left off before at the point before we start the actual discussion of the plagues, and
could you give us the chapter and verse where you left off?
Okay, I think it was Exodus 7 verse 1. If I think that's what where we ended last time.
Marty, would you like me to do my quote at the beginning?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, we will. I just want to be sure that everybody is in agreement that it's Exodus 7 verse 1.
That's a good place.
Okay, that's okay. That's okay. David, you're on.
Go ahead.
Well, thank you, Marty, and it's good to see everybody's here. And Michael, I certainly hope you do not have any other dizzy spells, but I would see a physician about it. I wouldn't waste any time on that. But anyway, but Marty, as a physician himself, is far more able to do that. My poetic quotation to welcome us today is from Alfred Lord Tennyson's Maud. And he talks a little bit about astrology here, which real astronomers don't pay attention to. But I salute astrology as being something that we really, really realize has taught us an awful lot about the motions of the planets. And if it were not for astrology over the millennia, we wouldn't be having the Webb Space Telescope today. Anyway, the other thing is that astrology was something that ancient Hebrews had a lot of fun with. They didn't follow it, they didn't practice it, but they did check to see where the planets were. Anyway, here's the poem from verse 4 of Maud. Here will I lie while these long branches sway, and you fair stars that crown a happy day go in and out as if at merry play. Then nursed at ease and brought to understand a sad astrology, the boundless plain that makes you tyrants to your iron skies, innumerable pitiless, passionless eyes, cold fires, yet with power to burn and brand his nothingness into man. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Thank you very much. Well, I'm going to ask that we read Exodus 7, verse 1. But before we do, I want to backtrack just a little bit because there's a little explanation beforehand. And why don't we reread verse 26 through 30? David, you read it last time.
Okay, I could read it again. These are that Aaron and Moses, to whom the Lord said, bring out the children of Israel from the land of Egypt according to their hosts. These are they that spoke to Pharaoh, king of Egypt, to bring out the children of Israel from Egypt. These are that Moses and Aaron. And it came to pass on that day when the Lord spoke unto Moses in the land of Egypt, that the Lord did speak unto Moses, saying, I am the Lord. Speak thou unto Pharaoh, king of Egypt, all that I speak unto thee. And Moses said before the Lord, Behold, I am of uncircumcised lips, and how shall Pharaoh hearken unto me?
Okay, let's stop at that point.
Yeah, I wanted to point out here that this was a question that we brought up last week.
Yes.
One of Wendy's semi-humorous questions was Moses circumcised? And I believe in this final verse of chapter 6, he answers that question. Behold, I am of uncircumcised lips, and how shall Pharaoh hearken unto me?
Okay. Now, many of us may have impeded speech instead of uncircumcised lips. And the other is that we had a similar discussion in the past because it could have been that he was tongue-tied. In other words, at the base of the lip, if the membrane, excuse me?
Lingual frenum.
Thank you. If that is a little shortened, you can't raise your tongue the way it should, and it could simply be that. Okay, because to treat that, we know today that you have to free up the tongue, and the oral surgeons have the ability to take care of that. So it's we don't know for sure. Okay, no, none of us were around. Although there are days that I feel I was there. That I feel old enough that I could have been there. But the point is that that's really what we think is that it's that he was tongue-tied. That's one explanation. Yes, Steve.
Yeah. I don't want to interrupt you. I can wait until you've finished your.
No, go ahead.
Oh, well, just two comments, if I may. One, sort of modern medical perspective on the whole tongue-tied issue. Most pediatricians now will tell you that actually, tongue-tied was assumed to be causative for a speech impediment. It probably really is not. That's just a very widely held myth. The only really documented problem is young babies to nurse. For that, it can be an impediment. So sometimes we refer to ENT for that, to clip it, or an oral surgeon. Now, the other thing I wanted to mention is the whole issue of the uncircumcised lips, what exactly that means. There is a midrash, and if you sort of search through your Hebrew school memories, I'm probably not the only one who's heard this, but the story is that Pharaoh became, when Moses was growing up in Pharaoh's household, that Pharaoh became concerned that this foreigner youngster could become a usurper of the throne. They decided to do a little test. They placed a pile of jewels or sparkling diamonds or something in front of the baby, and next to that they placed coals. And they said, okay, we'll see what the baby reaches for. If the baby reaches for the jewels, that's problematic. That means he's seeking my throne. And so the baby, of course, babies are attracted to something shiny and interesting. So the baby starts to reach, baby Moses starts to reach for the jewels, and an angel takes his hand, diverts it, and makes him touch the hot coals. And immediately the child, reflexively sticks his little hand in his mouth with a piece of coal on it, burns his tongue, and hence Moses had impeded speech. A midrash, and to get the exact source or document, I'd have to Google a little bit. But I think if you Google the story, you might be able to find this. But I would, personally, I think there's a lot of basis for what Marty said, because it sort of intuitively, I think, uncircumcised would seem to mean, you have an extra bit of tissue that impedes, so that would make sense. It would make sense that it was something like being tongue-tied or having a short frenulum.
And there are other midrash. Okay, Kabbalistically, the Kabbalists have a different story on that as well, and so it's midrash, and so yeah, we just need to be aware that, and maybe it wasn't exactly what we think it was. Maybe it was not physical. Maybe he had other issues. Maybe he had a lisp. Maybe he had, maybe he was not as eloquent a speaker. It doesn't necessarily have to be a physical defect. Yes, Don, and then David, yes.
He's talking about Moses and the lisp. Yeah.
We hear you now. We hear you now, Joanne.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
I've had Gary join me here. I'm on my phone.
Okay, well, you're working fine.
I'm listening. Keep
Okay.
going. I'm intrigued.
Okay. Yes, Don.
So the phrase uncircumcised lips is really a unique and strong couple of words, and it appears nowhere else that I know of in the Bible. And it's thrown in there all of a sudden, and it must be have some theological meaning, because circumcised is part of the most basic of the covenants. And yet totally obscure. I mean, we'll never see it again, and we haven't seen it before. So I don't know. It seems to me that a medical explanation is a bit of a stretch in this case.
Well, that's why I say there are other ideas that we can throw into the mix. And yes, the Kabbalists have a different way of looking at this. And but I am not going to go into it because it is sexual.
Oh, Marty?
Yes. Okay. David had his hand up, and then Steve.
The whole Bible is sexual. But so.
One of the things that I wanted to say is that is not the Kabbalistic interpretation, but the David interpretation is that God is not letting Moses get away.
Right.
Complaining
That's
about
it.
this.
Right there.
He is saying, you are going to do this. If you stutter, you'll go work your way through it. And I think this is a very forward and modern way of looking at it. You're going to rise above it, and you're going to do as I command you.
Absolutely. Yes.
No matter what. And I
Yes.
really like that. I enjoy that thought.
And that's why you need the prelude of what has been said, and then what David read today for today's passage. Once you do all that, then it starts to make more sense. Okay, but you need the rest of verses from 7:1 on, and we'll get into that. Yes,
Marty,
Steve, and then Larry.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that let's remember that the Tanakh is written in Hebrew. Okay, we're talking about the word circumcised, uncircumcised. So I went back to the Hebrew. Okay?
Yes.
The word in Hebrew is arel, and I do have my handy entomological dictionary here so we can find out what the actual sources are of this word, how this word actually gets used in Hebrew or in Semitic languages. So, the first is the obvious, to be uncircumcised, but I also see here to become dull or become stupid. So it does refer also, there are, or law is also the fruit of a tree for the first 3 years. That's forbidden. That is another meaning of it. That's another usage. So it does have sort of it's not only specifically referring to the genitals, but it's sort of a more general term to denote, I guess, lack of a certain level of quality, I guess. A dullness or stupidity. So, so again, and this is possible that, as Marty pointed out, that Moses just said, I'm not really a skilled orator. Some very, very talented people, and also people who turned out to be leaders, are not necessarily great speakers. Yitzhak Rabin was always made fun of because he was a very, very slow speaker. It's just the way he was, and sometimes I guess when he was first presented as a to the party as a candidate, as a prime minister, he didn't impress people that much because he was kind of slow and boring, and I remember who it was who told him to kind of pick up the pace a little bit, and just, I guess ultimately he did get the skills, but it doesn't always
Interesting
even to those who are in leadership.
Sure.
Positions.
Larry.
Okay, anatomically, not only in lingual frenum, there's a labial frenum, and I have seen them that they could be quite prominent. So another point of anatomy.
Gail.
Yeah, I was just going to say, before it was referred to as heavy of tongue, and that would kind of go along with what Steve was just saying. But again, I have to kind of agree with Don that, to me, it should have kind of a theological meaning in some way, because that feels correct too. So take your pick.
Let me just backtrack for 1 second. No, I find it interesting that some of the rabbis just avoid talking about it. That it's left up to, I guess, our interpretations, or I just don't know. In my readings, I just have not come across anything else. So that's the prelude. Let's go and read verses 1 through 7.
Okay, would you like me to read that?
That's fine.
Okay. And the Lord said unto Moses, See, I have set thee in God's stead to Pharaoh, and Aaron thy brother shall be thy prophet. Thou shalt speak all that I command thee, and Aaron thy brother shall speak unto Pharaoh, that he let the children of Israel go out of his land. And this is interesting that coming up, that God is going to predict what Pharaoh is going to do. And I will harden Pharaoh's heart and multiply my signs and my wonders in the land of Egypt. But Pharaoh will not hearken unto you, and I will lay my hand upon Egypt and bring forth my hosts, my people, the children of Israel, out of the land of Egypt by great judgments. And the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord, when I stretch forth my hand upon Egypt and bring out the children of Israel from among them. And Moses and Aaron did so, as the Lord commanded them, as so did they. And Moses was 80 old, and Aaron 83 old, when they spoke unto Pharaoh.
Okay. Let's start. Any comments about, in general, about the entire paragraph that we just read? Let's start with that, and then let's go back to, we can start with verse 1, verse 2, verse 3, and take it in order. But in general, anything here that you have seen before, or things like that? Okay, Dawn, I know you had your hand up. I know Chris has had her hand up, and I know that Joanne has had her hand up too. So let's start with Dawn, and then Chris, and then Joanne.
Okay, thank you. I've said this before, but it kills me that God is forcing Pharaoh to harden his heart.
Yeah, we've had a couple of lengthy discussions on that. Yes.
I just want to continue just a little bit on that, is that it could have read, God said, Pharaoh's heart will be hardened. He will not let you go. But there's a causal connection here. And so God is saying, I'm going to do it. I am going to force these tragedies on all these millions of people, and I'm going to do it. And if I could just continue for a second. So connecting that back to what I did last week about Job, where it was Satan that was causing the evil to befall Job. But in this, I guess theodicy is the word I'm looking for. How does God inflict evil directly? But in this case, it seems to me that it's God. I'm never going to mention this again. I just want to get it off my chest.
Okay, you got it off your chest. Yeah, you had some answers from Rabbi Miri and also Rabbi Norman on that, and I don't want to dwell on it, but yes, you got it off your chest. Okay. Okay. And we also brought in the other rabbinic interpretations of the words and things like that. So, yes, Chris, you're next, and then Joanne.
Thank you, Marty, and Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Shabbat Shalom.
I just love the way that God makes a point on everybody will know that I am God. No matter what happens, no matter how you see it, no matter, nothing matters really, only that they will know that I am the only one, the Holy One. So that's all I wanted to say, because it's so important to me that He's always present, and you will always know that nobody.
Very good, very profound. I know Grace agrees with you. As far as Joanne, what did you want to say?
Well, I'm I'm hoping you hear me.
Oh yeah.
Good. I just want to say, being in my 80s myself, when someone tells me something, I oftentimes seem to be much slower answering, because I look at my 80 years and maybe there's a little wisdom there. And I think Moses has wisdom, and he talks slower, and he's known God his whole life. So he tries to make people understand about God, and that's hard to do.
Yes, it's a good observation. I have known people who are slower speakers, and while they're speaking in a slow manner, they are looking for the right words that they want to use. Okay, and that can also be, so yes, I'll underscore what you said. Very good, very good. Yes, Larry.
if you look at the Torah as a political document, this whole scenario is one God versus another God.
Yes,
Mhm.
it says that in verse 1.
Yes, that's my,
Yes.
and that's how we should, one of the lenses that we should look through as we study these next set of passages.
Very, very well stated.
Thank you.
In general, again, we have to ask the question before we get into the details, why would God take someone? Remember, Moses no longer wears the clothing of the Egyptians. Okay, he is a low class individual by his garments, whether Midianite or Hebrew. Okay, and so as a result, why would God want to select someone like that in the first place? Why not an equal individual in appearance to Pharaoh? Take a guess. Yeah, okay, Suzanne, yes.
Excuse me. I think God likes to use the underdog. People who seem to be weak or not of real significance. And then they step into a role of being a leader or a hero or, something like that.
Good point. Almost every story deals with that situation.
Right.
It's good. Yes, Steve.
Yeah. Well, and of course, God is very well. I guess we might like to think that God is very democratic in his perspective, that those outer trappings aren't the most important thing. And God has chosen a very diverse collection of people ultimately through the years as his prophets. Amos
Yes.
was of lowly origin. He was, I guess, like an agricultural worker, or something like that, and didn't hesitate to say, he didn't have an illustrious pedigree, but he still, the inspiration fell upon him, and he had something to say, and he said it.
Yeah.
And the other just quick comment I said, it's good that we're so disturbed by the fact that God hardened Pharaoh's heart, because this is the exception rather than the rule. It's a very important principle of Judaism. Free choice is a very important principle. It's a very overriding principle. We are not preordained. You can't say, it's not my fault because God determined that I was going to kill this person, because God knows everything and God predetermines everything. There's a very well-known saying, rabbinic saying, that hakol biyadei shamayim chutz miyirat shamayim. And what that means translated is everything is indeed in the hands of heaven, okay, in God's hands, except for yirat shamayim, which is kind of your devoutness, or whether you're righteous or not. A person, everything, things can be determined. God made the world, God determines a lot, but the path that you choose is your choosing. Okay?
Right.
It's not chosen for you. You can decide to be good and be a moral person, and you can decide otherwise, and you've got no one to blame but yourself. So, that's pretty overriding, I think. That is, most even modern rabbinical commentators will tell you that that's a very, very important principle. It's not necessarily a principle in all religions, but it is in Judaism, that there is that free choice, okay? You've got no one to blame but yourself if you take that wrong path.
That's true. Yes, Chris. Chris, you're muted.
Going back to the comment that you were asking for, why would God select somebody with no title, no education, whatever? And it comes to me that he always, most of the time, he'll need this person to lead masses. And who could ever be a better example than somebody that came from the masses, somebody that had the understanding of the people and had walked that talk and had lived in those conditions for them to really listen to them and be able to be a leader of the people. So that was not really an underdog from my point of view. That was a hero already from the get-go. God saw that Moses had that potential to be, he had the heart for the people.
Right.
That was what he was mostly interested in, helping the people.
Agree. Very good. Yes, Helene.
I'm thinking about something I just heard and learned yesterday. The
Yes.
newest research on children who have been abused or hurt terribly is that to get those children with therapy or with help to tell their story, if they could tell the story of what happened to them, if they could, they call it happening. What happened to you? What happened in your life? The happening, if it's spoken, if it's shared, contains the learning we need to know, because we don't know why. God doesn't tell us why. He just says, do it, accept, love, and be there for every single person. Not the way I do, but the way God wants to accept every single person. And your story, what we do here, I believe, is a blessing for the world.
Thank you. Thank you for that input. Thank you. Yes, Gail.
I see a bit of a contradiction here. Well, maybe not contradiction, but interesting remark. In the very first verse, and we've agreed that Moses has come from humble, or he's presenting himself coming from humble backgrounds. But the Lord said to Moses, see, I've made you a God to Pharaoh. Now that's a whole different kettle of fish than, humble. I'm making you a God to Pharaoh. And I'd like to hear comments on that. Maybe Steve, you could look at the Hebrew on that.
I have placing you in the role of God.
Okay, well.
Not being actually God.
Right.
But
Sorry, Gail, could you give me the passage?
it's verse 1.
First verse in 7.
The first verse in 7, let me see what it says in Hebrew, bear with me.
I'm presenting you as a God to Pharaoh or whatever.
7, and the Lord said, see, I have set thee in God's stead. That's the way it's pronounced. Well, that's the way it's translated in mine. Moshe, Elohim lefaro. Do you know what? Yeah, you're right. If you read it straight, okay, literally, in translating literally is not necessarily translating accurately, because it has its own syntax, okay? But it does say Nataticha Elohim lefaro. So it does, if you read it very, very simply and very, very straight, And that may be the result of the older translators who maybe they didn't quite, understand that there's a lot of controversy in how things are translated, but literally it does say, I have given you as God. You could read it that way. Okay, that's what it says. It says, Nataticha Elohim lefaro. So let me see what Hertz says about that.
Oh, so it could be said that
No, God, Hertz.
I'm making you appear as a god to Pharaoh.
Well, no. I mean, most of the translators sort of would not necessarily select that. They're saying it's being translated, and Hertz doesn't discuss it a lot. He just
they don't.
Mentions it as if it's understood. He says, I have set thee in God's stead. To Pharaoh.
Right.
Okay. And
we have another word in English.
We
have another word in English that says all of that.
Well,
emissary.
Yeah.
Emissary.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, but just to explain exactly why this particular question, it's a legitimate question.
Oh, it is. It is.
The reason the question comes up is because Hebrew is an ultra concise language. Languages are the same. Hebrew tries to really distill things down to the minimum for whatever reason. Sometimes you have one word that can be translated as an entire sentence. That's just the logic of the language. That's the way Hebrew operates. So unfortunately, this particular phrase, because of that sort of miserliness of word usage, gets distilled down in a way that can be open to misinterpretation. So I think if you read it, I guess, sorry to be long-winded about this, but what I'm trying to say is that if you do a literal reading of it, it does say, yeah, I put you as God, because it just distills it down. It doesn't exactly use all the connective words that we would be using in English to make the sentence a little clearer, okay? It just wedges the word God in there. So that is open to some interpretation. And it seems like the more modern Jewish interpretation is, I'm setting you as a representative of God, not as God, not, to make you like God, because that would be intuitively, that would kind of be a little bit in contradiction to, principles of Judaism, where you elevate a person to a level of a deity. That's not something that's done.
Yes, Grace says that that her book uses the term "role of God."
I
Okay.
like that. Yeah.
And Suzanne.
I'm thinking that the Egyptians look at Pharaoh as a little G god. So for Moses to have equal footing with Pharaoh, only in the eyes of Pharaoh, but also in the eyes of the people, both Egyptians and I'm going to also say the Israelites, God has elevated him to this role, especially when the plagues start happening. Because
now,
through Moses.
So if Moses is God's prophet, now God is placing Aaron in the role of Moses' prophet. Okay. So because it says specifically that, what's very important, remember we had a discussion on what words you emphasize in your reading. If you just say, I place you in the role of God to Pharaoh with your brother Aaron as your prophet. Okay. But if you change the emphasis on certain words, See, I place you in the role of God to Pharaoh.
Mhm.
Okay. And your brother Aaron shall speak as your prophet. Once you do that, you have a totally different, it sort of says what Steve's getting after. This is a natural sequence of events. I haven't demoted you. I'm going to place Aaron in the role as your prophet. Okay. Bless you, David. Silent sneeze. So anyway, any other comments? Well, what about, and then in verse 2, it goes further into the explanation. We've run into this before in Torah. We sort of start discussing and debating a particular statement, and then the explanation follows in the next verses. So if we re-emphasize, David, you want to read just verse 2? But you have to unmute yourself, David. I know it was silent reading to yourself, but
I'm enjoying it. I can say anything I want, nobody hears. Okay, now what did you want me to read again?
Just verse 2, nothing else.
I'll read just verse 2. Thou shalt speak all that I command thee, and Aaron thy brother shall speak unto Pharaoh, that he let the children of Israel go out of his land.
Okay, so that's really the answer to what we're discussing. Any further comments? So, and then I know we already discussed the word harden, so we don't. But in defense of what Don was saying, or even if you use the term honoring, or you use I let Pharaoh determine his own fate, whatever phrases you want to use, that it says that I may multiply my signs and marvels in the land of Egypt. So I can understand the interpretation that Don is trying to make. I've heard that many times, but at the same time, what do others feel about that? If no other discussion, we can move on, because I know we've gone over this before. Verse 4. This is a prophetic statement of what will happen.
But Pharaoh will not hearken unto you, and I will lay my hand upon Egypt, and bring forth my hosts, my people, the children of Israel, out of the land of Egypt by great judgments.
Any further comments on that? Okay, then let's
He said,
and then eventually
verse
verse 5, if you just want to reread that, David.
And the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord, when I stretch forth my hand upon Egypt and bring out the children of Israel from among them.
So again, if God was saying this, if you emphasize the word I in this reading, then it is really a battle between God and Pharaoh. Okay, so again, it depends on how and also the word my hand. Okay, it's going to be greater than Pharaoh's hand. Okay, Chris, and then Larry, because I just saw the hands go up and I wasn't sure. So ladies first. But Chris, you have to unmute yourself.
Okay, here we go. Thank you. And I think what you said is just so really important, because it really is a fight between Pharaoh and God. And it's always going to be a fight between your opposer and God. It's never really you. It's just, what are you going to do now with this situation? Are you going to let God deal with it, or are you going to try to get in the middle and try to make something out of it? And the beauty of this is organized. You know, he's got a plan, and all you have to do is follow it. To me, it's simple. Of course, not always we get this, but the truth is that I'm thinking about Goliath and David. It was never about Goliath. It was never about David. It was about God and Goliath. And when David saw that perspective and he said, what can I do? That little uncircumcised giant, you know, it was putting it in the proper place. And I think that's what we needed to learn at that point, as beginning to learn to recognize our God before us. And God needed to do it the way he did it, because it was like going to school and learning over and over and over, who is this God that we are supposed to follow now? Because Moses understood that, and not the rest of the people. So that was my comment.
Thank you. Very good. Very good. Yes, please, Larry.
Okay, number 5, the Egyptians will know that I am God, but not expecting them to worship this God. Now, we've discussed Judaism. Here is a case where there is not really monotheism. There's a recognition that other people recognize other gods.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yes. Very good. Very good. We've mentioned that indirectly before, but it's a good time to insert that into the discussion, Larry. Yes. Any other comments? Yeah, yes, Ruth Ann.
Sorry, I had to go to the pharmacy for Sid. Just got our test results. We're both negative.
Yay!
No,
Great.
he has a cold, he has the flu, I don't know what, but we're
That's
negative.
okay.
Now I
That's
just have to
okay.
go feed him.
Just when you know, the same things, if we think about it, bad colds and flu, you have to practice the same thing, because those viruses are spread the same way. And so you still have to be careful when you go out and things like that.
But I'm happy, yay.
Yes, that is good. That is good news. So any further discussion on that? So basically verse 6, Moses and Aaron agree. They will do what God has told them to do.
Marty, I think Chris is signaling to you.
Oh, I'm sorry. No. Oh, okay. Okay. And then why is it important to put down Moses and Aaron's respective ages? Why all of a sudden are they putting this in here? Any ideas?
They may be, as Wendy just suggested, they may be simply trying to say that Moses is the elder brother.
Well, no, it says Aaron is 83 and Moses is 80.
So that Aaron is the older brother.
Right.
And Moses is the younger brother. Still a kid.
But why would they make this statement? Why is this so important to emphasize? I believe Joanne had her hand up, and then Grace.
Okay. I just think I see when I read that today, I realized that there's a whole history of both Aaron and Moses, and that's when they were younger, etc.
Mhm.
But now they're mature. They really are listening maybe more to God and understanding from this whole history. And maybe this just tells us to be nice to our grandparents. I'm not sure.
Okay. That's a good idea. Yes, Grace.
Well, thank you and good morning to everybody. I was just thinking that this has a familiarity to it. Okay. The youngest is not always, the younger of the two is asked to be God's right hand here, to be the role of God with the help of the elder brother, right? Isn't that what we would like if we have children? Wouldn't we want our older sibling to be there to lift up the younger, to give them support in the troubles of life, or things that are going on? And I think it reemphasizes that. And even previously, we've seen where, the younger brother steps up to the plate, and it's kind of a repeat of that. It's not always the elder child is going to be the great one, but perhaps even the meek and the more challenged individual can be a substantial leadership for God's people. I've got alarms going off, and I'm still a little unstable with my glucose this morning.
Okay.
That's normal. But anyway, I'm just wondering, that's what I'm kind of picking up here is just that the emphasis is that perhaps, and it's not as profound as I really want to speak, but I'm thinking that, why do they give the ages? It's just to show us once again, that it's not the elder brother or the elder sibling isn't the one that's going to be the greatest leader, but perhaps even the younger have, some significance. That's all. Thank you.
Grace, that was very good. Very well stated. There are any other ideas? I just want to read what Rabbi Plout has to say, because, Joanne, did you want to say something?
Well, I think I read this many times, but I never realized Aaron was the older. I always put him younger. And this puts such a different look on this whole thing, such as Moses, was put into the little basket, etc. But where was Aaron all these years? He was just, do they have the same fathers? I'm thinking of all this history between them. It's like it's flooding me. So you continue.
Okay. Any other? Yes, Steve, you wanted to answer that?
Yeah. And just sort of on the same note as what's been brought up is, they are both clearly senior citizens. And are just at this very late stage of life, they are embarking on the most important central roles of their lives, which is a bit inspirational to us senior citizens. Okay, I'm going to include myself in that group. It's never too late. Okay, and I think it's emphasizing that even at that advanced age, they are stepping up to the plate, and in doing what has to be done. So it puts it very much into perspective that Moses's entire career, his real career, began when he was already clearly a senior citizen. Even though back in those days, You know, you could live to 120, apparently.
Sure, you're right. That's going to come
You
up.
know,
later.
everything's relative.
Sure. Okay,
But
Don,
80
yes.
is still a lot.
I think I heard Joanne speak to the question about that Aaron was around 3 years old when Moses was set loose amongst the reeds in the basket. And that's problematic to me. Steve, could you speak to that part of the question?
What is your question specifically, though?
Well, Joanne's question, really, I thought it was a insightful question. Is what if Moses was unwanted and set loose in the basket in the reeds? Where was Aaron at that time? What did he
according to the Tanakh and the embellishing Midrash is the main person who was charged with supervising Moses when he was hidden in the bulrushes was his older sister Miriam, also who was old enough to supervise and old enough to come up with a smart plan, you know, when Moses was discovered by Pharaoh's daughter. She ran up very conveniently and says, "Oh, I know a woman who can wet nurse your newfound child for you." Just conveniently happened to be Yocheved,
his mother.
But we still haven't got Aaron. We still haven't.
Sorry?
Got,
well, Aaron was a little too young to supervise. He was only 3, but he was, you know, he was 3. Yeah, so the main supervisor was, again, I'm not sure I understand your question. Why is that problematic that he was 3?
Well, I'm really following up Joanne's question, which was if Aaron was already born and 3 years old when Moses was basically discarded.
Oh, he wasn't discarded.
No, he's not discarded in any way. You can't twist that around to make it.
I'm not twisting it. I'm just, he was let go from his family.
He was saved by this action. Otherwise, he would have been killed.
And Aaron wasn't threatened at all?
Because the proclamation, I guess it comes down at another time.
Okay.
Proclamation from Pharaoh is to kill all the boys.
Yeah, I just don't, but it's the newborn that is Israelites that are going to be killed, not if they already were alive and kicking. Okay, it's the newborn. So it's so it didn't pertain to when this proclamation comes down. We have to make the assumption that Aaron was already living when that proclamation comes down. And so it's going to be Moses that's singled out. But I think it's important to realize that even today, I think not everyone is aware of child welfare boards and what they have to go through when mothers have to give up a child that they can no longer support. This has gone on for a long time throughout the history of mankind, where young women, married or single, doesn't matter, where they cannot support the child, they have to give that child up. And foster homes have to be provided for those kids. So this is not, it shouldn't be strange. This discussion shouldn't be strange to us. All right. And so I think that from the mother's point of view, from not being able to take care of that child, I want the child to survive and hopefully have a better home than what I can give. So maybe that's something that we're supposed to consider also, even in today's day and age. I'm sure some rabbis before have used those words, very similar words, and ministers and the like. to get people activated in that. Sue was on a child welfare board, and the stories she used to hear were horrendous. And they had to step in and provide that. So I think that this is a good case for child welfare. If you look at it from that standpoint, then Miriam was doing, Yocheved, Miriam, and they were doing the right thing, and that was possible for them at that time. So sometimes we have to try to put ourselves into the shoes of the different people. There's tons of midrash on Aaron growing up, okay? Because nothing is said about him.
Mhm.
It's all focused on Moses because he's going to be the chosen leader. Yes, Gail.
Aaron doesn't speak one solitary word
Right.
until the golden calf.
Correct.
It was way down the road.
Correct.
Not one word. I mean, the relationship between these two men, it's just, and it's a void. It's really interesting.
And so I just wanted to, there's one other thing in the discussion, not so much about the role of Aaron, but also why Aaron and Moses are listed here. And I just wanted to read this from Plout. This concludes the accreditation passages. The Torah is not bothered by Moses' high age, since he was a much younger man when he fled Egypt, and thus a whole lifetime remained unrecorded. Jewish tradition filled the gap with many tales of his dazzling mental and military feats. Okay, so lots of stories, but nobody was around. Okay, and so we can, sometimes, and here I wish Rabbi Mary were here, because she would want to say, don't get wrapped up in the story. It's the messages that are most important. Okay, you can remember the story, but what does it mean to you? What does it mean to a people? That's what's going to be most important. Okay. So, we have a stamp of approval that here that this is like when you list all the members, all the clans, okay, after an important passage or before something that's going to an important event. Here's another way of stamp. It's a stamp of approval. Amen. Okay.
Amen.
That's another way of looking at it. Okay, verse 8. Does anyone else want to read?
Are you listening? Okay.
Anyone else want to read? Okay, David, you're still on.
Okay, verse 8. And the Lord spake unto Moses, Vaydaber Elohim el Moshe laemor, and unto Aaron, saying, when Pharaoh shall speak unto you, saying, show a wonder for you, then thou shalt say unto Aaron, take thy rod and cast it down before Pharaoh, and it become a serpent, that it become a serpent. And Moses and Aaron went in unto Pharaoh, and they did so, as the Lord hath commanded. And Aaron cast down his rod before Pharaoh and before his servants, and it became a serpent. Then Pharaoh also called for the wise men and the sorcerers, and they also, the magicians of Egypt, did in like manner with their secret arts, for they cast down every man his rod, and they became serpents. But Aaron's rod swallowed up their rods, and Pharaoh's heart was hardened, and he hearkened not unto them, as the Lord had spoken.
Okay, let's stop at that point. So again, there's prophecy by God, and cast your rod down, and it shall turn into a serpent. There, the Torah uses, okay, Larry, yes.
Yeah, I wanted to elaborate on that. It's serpent, not a snake. Now,
Correct.
Friedman gives a good commentary. This is different from the snake, Nahas, that Moses' staff became in Exodus 4:3. Moses performed that miracle for the Israelite elders. Now in front of Pharaoh, Aaron's staff becomes the tenon. This is the term is used for a big sea serpent that God made on the 5th day of creation, Genesis 1:21. They are not merely snakes as people often pictured them. They are extraordinary creatures from a seemingly unearthly, earthly realm. Some said like dinosaurs, that they're more menacing. There's a strong connotation difference between serpent and snake.
Very good. Very good. That's
Wow.
important to understand. Yes, Steve.
Just the word in Hebrew is tanin.
Hmm.
Modern Hebrew, that's actually a crocodile.
Correct.
But again, just to emphasize, modern Hebrew is not biblical Hebrew, so the modern Hebrew was adapted from biblical Hebrew. They find things and from context, they say, okay, well, we're going to use this word, in this modern usage, but just interesting. Yeah, and I didn't notice that before. I've just carefully read, and I saw absolutely correct that it's not Nahash, it's
That's right.
Tanin. I could take a moment to look it up in the dictionary and see what, the origins of the Tanin is, but, very possibly they're going to say exactly what David said about mythical creatures or
You mean Larry? Yes.
aquatic.
Yes.
Yeah, Larry.
But yes, as a matter of fact, one of there was a recent paleontologist finding, paleontology in South America, where they found a snake that had 4 legs. So this goes back millions of years, but maybe who knows? But just to throw some extra mud on the issue, but it does use a different word.
Yeah.
Yes, Steve.
Yeah, and here I just found it in the etymological dictionary, and indeed it's a sea monster, serpent, dragon, and also crocodile.
Yes.
And that sort of comes from actually ancient Semitic languages. I guess that was the word that was used for crocodile. So it wasn't totally new usage of an old word. It was probably pretty legitimate. There's also a Greek, was influenced by the Greek. So that it's possible that this Hebrew word tanin came from Greek too. Which means to shake. I wouldn't be able to explain what the connection would be, but that's what it says here. So that's a story on tanin on that.
Okay.
Word.
So yes, Gail, you had your hand up.
I was just going to say a crocodile would, they live in the Nile, so this would be a very logical animal to have.
Mm-hmm.
Very good. Now the Egyptians also were a believer in snakes. What was the symbol used on the pharaoh's hat? An asp. Okay.
A cobra.
A cobra. Well, a cobra is a similar type. It's a small.
A caduceus has
the same thing. It can go both ways.
right. Also, in Mayan mythology, there is a feathered serpent. In Native American, there is the water serpent, Evanyu, and that's featured in so much of the rock art and pottery of the ancient.
Yes, you see this at it's outside of Los Alamos. It starts with a B. I forget the But in the caves, you see a lot of drawings of serpents. They worshipped serpent gods. Yes. However, the issue of a rod and a serpent and everything, I was curious about that. It uses the word spells, with their spells, to enwrap. In Hebrew, the Hebrew stem word LWT, lamed, to enwrap, so that the noun would mean things kept under wraps, closely guarded secrets. So hence the spells were secret acts, if you will. However, even into modern times, snake charmers can turn snakes into rods. Okay. They can induce catatonic rigidity in the cobra by exerting strong pressure on a nerve just below its head. In this state, the snake assumes a rod-like appearance and can even be handled by onlookers. It looks like a stick. The jolt it receives when thrown to the ground can restore its mobility. And this is a trick of snake charmers to this day. So, who knows? But what happens, and it's written in the book, that shows that Moses' rod turning into a snake, what does that snake or serpent, I should correct myself, the serpent do that shows that there's more power behind it?
It devours the others.
It devours the others. That's right.
Aaron's rod swallowed their rods.
So that's more than just that old trick. Okay. And so that's to be, so it's important to see the difference. So Aaron's, that's at the end of verse 12. Despite all of that, Pharaoh is still taken with himself, and he knows that he still has power. His magicians can do part of it, but he's so wrapped up in himself that he's failed to see that one snake, the snake that God, or the serpent, I should say, it's my brain, that serpent is mightier than the sorcerer's serpent. So Pharaoh deludes himself in believing that he still is correct. Yes, Gail?
I just noticed this is Aaron's staff, not Moses.
It's Aaron's staff, yes.
The mystery man to the fore again, yeah.
Yes. It's going, we're going to learn a lot about Aaron's nature later on. Gail sort of it alluded to things in with the golden calf incident. But any other comments here? Okay. And I just wanted to, there was one.
Marty, I have a
That's it.
comment.
That's it. Yes. Yes, please. Grace, go ahead.
I was reading in the commentary, and it's like, what I'm trying to understand is that it's remarkable because Aaron's rod turns into a bigger, encompassing device, swallows up the rest of. When have you ever seen a snake eat a snake? I don't know that I have, but I'm not a snake. I'm not a real big fan of reptiles to begin with, but it's like, it's got to be something that put them in an overwhelming, apparent, this is beyond the man's reach. This has to be coming from another source. The magicians, the sorcerers on, Pharaoh's behalf had to be in awe of this. They had to be thinking, uh-oh, something's up here. And I think Pharaoh is possibly, he's like, nah, this can't be real. I don't know what he's done. But, now the competition's on. Because now I'm in big competition mode, and I'm gonna outdo this Aaron and Moshe, who are trying to step up and remove these people from my land for a different cause. Because he's got one thing on his agenda: he's got to be the ruler. And so I think they're all in a bit of shock at this point. That uh-oh. Like something's about to take place, something is changing, and and Pharaoh's saying, I don't like this, right? And that's why his heart is stiffened. He's saying, no, I don't like this. And he's not admitting that this is coming from God, because he knows that they have a different God, but he's not yet willing to accept that fact. That's kind of what I'm seeing. I just wanted to make that comment.
Okay, you take care of your blood sugar.
We're working on it.
Okay. But that's very important, Grace. Very important. Any other comments at this point? Well, then let's go on and see how God looks at all this. Okay, so just verse 14. Just verse 14.
Okay. And the Lord, one of the things before I start reading is that Wendy pointed out that we do know that the gopher snakes here in the Arizona desert do dine on rattlesnakes. And so I've never seen that happen except in the movies, but it does indeed happen. Anyway.
Good point. Good point.
And the Lord said unto Moses, Pharaoh's heart is stubborn. He refuseth to let the people go. Get thee unto Pharaoh in the morning. Lo, he goeth.
Okay, wait a minute. Okay, just verse 14.
Okay.
Just verse 14. And okay, so does God really need to say this, or is this very apparent? Or is this just put here for emphasis? Yes, Don.
Is the question, or is Moses going to ask for the people to be let go to worship for 3 days, or is this to let them go completely? Because
that's an important question that you raise, because the phrase is to let them worship in the wilderness, not worship while they're still in Egypt. And so you can now put yourself in Pharaoh's shoes and say, well, they could be out of my control. Okay. Larry has something to say about that.
Yeah, I'd like to give commentary from Fox. Heavy with stubbornness. In the plague narrative, the root kaved, heavy, occurs 10 times. 5 times referring to Pharaoh's heart and 5 referring to the plagues themselves. The latter are perhaps seen as direct outcomes of the former. So that it's an important word here, used
Yes.
repetitively.
Yes. But Don, your question is also very important from the other standpoint, because the wilderness is outside of Egypt. If it would not be even in Goshen, well, it could be, because some people, there's a modern Goshen, and then there's the ancient Goshen that may be that's outside of Pharaoh's domain. So where are they going to be? But it's not part of Egypt. So I just wanted to say so I think the question is well stated, because God wants them to worship him in the wilderness.
But does Pharaoh think that Moses is asking for a leave of absence and then they'll come back and get back to work? Or does Pharaoh think they're asking to be set free completely?
Okay, now we want to put ourselves into the shoes of Pharaoh. Okay, he says, okay, you're asking me to do this. You're all shirkers. You don't want to work. You don't want to earn, you're supposed to work for me, and you're not doing this. So even then, I don't trust, I just see you as a way of getting out from doing things for me. I'm just paraphrasing what we've been reading.
But what is Moses asking for? I mean, how is Pharaoh hearing what Moses is asking for? Is he hearing, we just want a few days to go and worship our God? Or is he hearing, we're done, no more of this, we got to get our own stubble?
Take your pick. Both work. Both work. Okay, I see several hands up. Gail, did you have your hand up before?
I was just going to say it's 3. He asked for 3 days initially.
Yes, that's right.
Now, I don't know where we are now, but that was the original proposal.
Yeah. And Suzanne, I think you had your hand up too.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I agree with Gail. It started off as wanting for 3 days, but as we go along, it's going to morph into that they're going to want to leave.
Yes, it does move in that direction.
Yeah.
But God is upping the ante.
Right, but I don't think we're quite at that point yet.
Correct.
But Pharaoh's thinking, okay, give an inch, they'll take a mile.
Or Pharaoh, for that matter.
I'm sorry, Chris, yes?
Or Pharaoh, if it's not ready, for that matter. Both parties are not ripe enough to make that final decision.
Okay, and we're going to see this as the ante is upped. We haven't gotten into the actual plagues just yet, but then if we, it says in verse 16, again, the Lord, the God of the Hebrews, sent me to say, it's being repeated, let my people go that you may worship me in the wilderness.
Mm-hmm.
But you have paid no heed until now. Now I'm going to have to up the ante, so to speak. And until you get the message that this is that God is doing this. Yes, please, Larry.
I have an interesting commentary by Rashi regarding 15. He goes out to the Nile. The medieval Hebrew commentator Rashi said, that Pharaoh went secretly to the river in order to relieve himself so that the Egyptians would not see him as less than a god.
Now that is interesting.
Mhm.
That is so that's an interesting midrash. That is very, very good. Thank you for bringing that into the discussion.
That's my job.
Oh, golly. And then it says and God continues to tell Moses and Aaron what to do. See, I shall strike the water in the Nile with the rod that is in my hand, and it will be turned into blood, etc., etc. So now Moses and Aaron have heard all of this. Let's see what happens when what God further says to Moses what to do. So, David, would you please read verse 19?
Okay, and
We
the
can
Lord
read
said,
18.
Well, we've been discussing. Okay, we can go back. We read it on and on. Verse 16 through 16 through 19.
Okay.
Here we go.
We discussed some of it. It's my fault too.
And thou shalt say unto him, the Lord, the God of the Hebrews, hath sent me unto thee, saying, let my people go, that they may serve me in the wilderness. And behold, hitherto thou hast not hearkened. Thus saith the Lord, in this thou shalt know that I am the Lord. Behold, I will smite with the rod that it is my hand upon the waters that are in the river, and they shall be turned to blood. And the fish that are in the river shall die, and the river shall become foul, and the Egyptians shall loathe to drink water from the river.
Okay. Any comments about that? This is the prophecy.
Yeah.
Okay. And any other comments before we read on? Yes, Joanne.
Well, my Torah says, let my people go that they may worship me, not serve me, but worship. And that's a whole different.
Yeah.
I think of it in a very different way.
Yeah, mine says worship also.
Okay. Yeah. To worship kind of means to maybe build an altar and worship, whereas to serve means daily I do what a God asks of me. This
raises an interesting discussion. What is the actual difference between worship and serving?
Yeah.
Yes, Suzanne.
Can we ask Steve what it says in the Hebrew?
Okay.
Steve, I think you're muted.
It would mean serving and worship is praying to. You're praying to someone, and serving means you are accommodating one.
Okay.
Oh,
very good.
Marty, could the question be repeated? The question.
Okay, what is the difference
Question
between
about the Hebrew?
What is okay?
Oh,
what is the Hebrew word used
for? What?
Verse 16.
Is it verse 16?
16.
Yeah, let my people go and it's either that they may serve me in the wilderness or that they may worship me.
Okay, 1 second. Okay, Okay, the word that's used is oved, ayin bet dalet, which means that's been translated again. You know, Hebrew is a very distinct language, as I explained before. The word that's used for worship is the same word that's used for work or to serve, like
Okay.
is a slave. Okay, so it's the same root, ayin bet daled, same root as slave. So it is one of the commonly used words when we talk about how we're going to serve God or how to worship
Okay.
God. It's not exactly worship. It doesn't sort of define, is it prayers, is it sacrifice? It just says serve, okay, is what it is. It's the same as a servant serving. It's the same root. Does that answer the question? Is that what was asked?
Okay, now what does the English servant mean?
Would know.
When you serve.
Work. Steve said work.
Yeah,
It's give.
like doing your master's.
It's give. You're giving your master of yourself.
Of yourself. Mhm.
Okay? And it's a different connotation than slave.
Oh, yeah. Mhm.
Even legally,
Mhm.
an indentured servant was not a slave. He did it of his own
Of his free will.
free will
That's
so
right.
that he could pay off a debt.
Mhm.
Okay, rather than go to debtor's prison.
But the word used is the same word that we used as slave. You know, we sing on Passover, we sing Avadim Hayinu. We were slaves.
Yeah.
Is the understanding. We were slaves to the Egyptians. We were not indentured servants to the Egyptians. We were slaves. So it's the differentiation is not the same as the differentiation in English. It is, it's servitude. Okay, so the word used is, serving God, and again, it continues to be a word that's later commonly used for worshiping God or practices.
Yes.
It's always the word that's used very often is la'avod, which means work or to serve or to be a servant or to be a slave.
Okay.
Any of those.
Thank you. Larry.
Okay, Everett Fox, who's considered one of the most literal translation, he uses serve. Friedman uses serve. Alter uses worship.
Mm-hmm.
So among the greats of translation, there is differences also.
Yes. Interesting. Any other comments? Yes, Gail.
Well, if you're a servant of God, you don't want to say you're a slave of God. That would be really kind of counterproductive. And that shows free will. You're serving out of free will. You're not a slave to God. Of course, that's where religion tends to go downhill sometimes, because people become slaves to the doctrine.
Very good. So it's interesting because that is exactly the what Steve is getting after, with the different translations of the word. Don, and then Chris.
Isn't the choice of word what God and Moses want Pharaoh to understand rather than what the Hebrews mean? Seems to me that they want Pharaoh to understand that they want to either serve or worship. Is a distinction without a difference in this case. So Pharaoh, who believes he's God anyway, would not see any difference. I mean, it hardly matters really which meaning is used.
Good point. Chris,
Yeah.
and then Joanne.
Okay, thank you. I'm just thinking about the word slave or servant, and I think the difference is the choice aspect of it, where you are a slave by choice to serve God, or you are a servant at the same thing, by choice to serve God. And whether the slave sounds too rough or too like you're putting all and getting nothing back, it's, I think again, if you come with your heart as a slave, and I remember the story on Torah that says that the servant will pierce his ear on the door because he was willing to remain a slave, being that he was under the protection of his master for that reason. Is that correct? I'm paraphrasing, I'm not exactly quoting it, but I think that again, what Steve is saying about slave, servant, it implies what you're doing with your heart. Again.
Okay. Any other comments? Oh, yes, Joanne, and then Steve.
I'm wondering at what point when the Israelites went to Egypt, they certainly weren't going as slaves. At one point, did they no longer be a servant to Pharaoh and became a slave? Was that 2 years before, 200 years? At some point, they are certainly servants now of Pharaoh.
Actually, no, they've been called slaves.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that was only, they were only Hebrews when Joseph was in Egypt and they were granted Goshen for them to live freely. But when the pharaohs changed, the pharaohs die and then everyone come out, he decided, okay, you've been freeloading too long. Now you're going to work as a slave. I think so.
Okay. Steve and then Don.
Yeah. I just wanted to sort of further clarify. I'm not sure that I'm sort of imparting this message clearly enough. So I'm going to take another shot at it. But, the fact that, as I've been saying, that Israel is Hebrew, is a very telegraphic language, very concise. Often the same word is used as multiple meanings in multiple contexts, and it's up to the reader totally to get it from the context.
That is the important.
So I'm not actually saying, it means slave, and maybe I'm not being clear enough, that people are understanding, specifically slave. No, I'm not actually translating it to a specific word in English, because it equates to a whole series of words in English.
Right.
The reader in Hebrew has to get it from context, for better or for worse.
Right.
And sometimes that lends itself to difficulties in translation, because you can legitimately translate it multiple ways, and then you have to scratch your head. Well, what are we talking about in this particular instance? So, giving you the word in Hebrew doesn't always serve to clear it up. Sometimes it mucks it up a little bit. But
that's a very important point. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Yes, Don.
I think Joanne's on a roll here with her questions, so I'm going to follow up, because at the time of Joseph, it seems, if I remember, that everyone who owned any land swapped the land for grain because there was a famine. So everybody that was left was no longer a landholder. They weren't even a serf because they didn't have the land. So now it's probably slavery by the time we get to Moses. But it'd be interesting to see how that happened because the Hebrews multiplied. There's what, at least coming up to 1 million Hebrews in the land, and their main part of production, you know, as we know, making bricks. And so it seems clear why Pharaoh was going to resist them suddenly dropping tools and heading off somewhere because all of a sudden there's no bricks. So the question is that slavery, or is that an interruption of production, or does Pharaoh have a case at all here for digging his heels in?
Okay.
Thank you, Joanne.
I think, okay, it's a good summary. Good
Yeah.
summary. Any other questions? Yes, Joanne.
One of the things that I've always admired about my Jewish friends is their critical thinking. And just now, in going through this, I think you're taught it at the age of 1 year or so. Thank you.
Wise guy, wise gal. Okay. I might as well do this for the purposes of discussion. What is going on with this water turning to blood?
Yeah.
What is this representing? And I found this. I looked up lists. This seemed to be the most useful list of all of them because it covered more of the Egyptian gods, turning the water of the Nile and every water-bearing vessel, if you will, to blood. There are several different gods. I may not pronounce these correctly. Khnum was the guardian of the river's source. Hapi, or Happy, was the spirit of the Nile. And Osiris was the Nile was considered the bloodstream of Osiris
Oh,
in Egyptian mythology. Okay. So we will find out more. We can read on so that you can see what's developing here. So not only is it, just as we've learned from previous readings, God says it, Moses says it, or in this case, we're Aaron, and it is done. So why don't we go on in our reading to up through verse 24. Okay. David, would you please read?
Okay, I shall.
Did you ask the question, what was the purpose of turning the Nile into blood? Was that a question?
Well, first, I wanted to put into play that there are 3 Egyptian gods, that idols, if you will, that they worshipped concerning the Nile. And one of the Egyptian stories is that the Nile was the blood of Osiris. Okay. So that's what and I'm trying to put that into play a little earlier so we can see what we're about to read, how, and then we can, like we usually do, go into different aspects of this. So David, if you would be kind
Okay,
enough.
thank you, Marty. And the Lord said unto Moses, say unto Aaron, take thy rod and stretch out thy hand over the waters of Egypt, over their rivers, over their streams, over their pools, and over all their ponds of water, that they may become blood. And there shall be blood throughout all the land of Egypt, both in vessels of wood and in vessels of stone. And Moses and Aaron did so, as the Lord commanded. And he lifted up the rod and smote the waters that were in the river in the sight of Pharaoh, and in the sight of his servants, and all the waters that were in the river were turned to blood. And the fish that were in the river died, and the river became foul, and the Egyptians could not drink water from the river. And the blood was throughout all the land of Egypt. And the magicians of Egypt did in the manner with their secret arts, and Pharaoh's heart was hardened, and he hearkened not unto them, as the Lord hath spoken. And Pharaoh turned and went into his house, neither did he lay even this to heart. And all the Egyptians digged round the river for water to drink, for they could not drink of the water in the river. And even days were fulfilled. After that.
Okay, that's enough, David. Okay. I know you wanted to give us a little nudge, give us, but to move on. But I think that we do need to go back. Any questions about what has been read? Yes, Don.
Well,
Okay. I'm mystified here because we see what happens to all the water. The entire municipal water supply is suddenly corrupted. But then Pharaoh's magicians, they do the same thing. There's an old joke about during the French Revolution, where a French engineer is sent to the guillotine, and the executioner pulls the latch and nothing happens, and the engineer looks up and says, "I see what's wrong." So it's so self-defeating. I mean, why would the Pharaoh's magicians do the same thing to the water supply? I don't get that.
They have their spells. That's all I can say. I don't know. But these are things that the people knew already that they could do. But this is more, much more than what it is just putting some dye in water or things like that. What God has done, it's implied here that what God has done is far worse. It's not just the water of the Nile, it's all water everywhere.
it was also about
Please.
removing all the pleasures that the Nile would give the Egyptians.
Very good.
And everything from the value of the fish dying and demonstrating the enormous power that was leveled on them.
It's a good point. Very good point. Okay, I don't know. I was looking at my book here, and there are three hands that have gone up. You guys decide who was first.
Suzanne was first.
Okay, Suzanne, then Chris, then Joanne.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment that I think the blood of the Nile also represented the death of the Hebrew baby boys.
That has been said before too. Yes. Chris.
Well, taking the water that is the source for planting, drinking, anything, it had kind of put the people on a really a big strain, knowing that nobody could go do anything to get water source. And I don't know how can you live without water for 7 days. Well, we weren't supposed to read that far, but it's still, even if it's 1 day, your dehydration level will go seriously high. So that is cutting life source completely from the Egyptians.
Very good. Joanne.
I was just going to say that to me, the Nile represented the life blood of the
Yes.
country.
Yeah.
And Chris just said that in her own
Yeah.
words. Yeah, it just is. Water is our source of life.
Right.
You know, we
Yeah,
need
that, because if you think about how each of us uses water today, it's no different
Right.
than the way it was
Yeah.
back then. Okay. Our needs are virtually the same. Yes, Steve.
There's actually the question was brought up, about the experiment the sorcerers of Egypt did to demonstrate,
Yes. What did
that's
you
not
find?
such a big deal. We can do that too, So commentator Ibn Ezra asked the question, the obvious question. He says, but they turned the entire water source to blood. What water were they demonstrating on? So by the
Yeah, that's true.
they say that water was obtained from Goshen. That, of course, this plague was inflicted on the Egyptians, not on the Hebrews. The Hebrews lived in Goshen. So in Goshen, maybe there were some water sources, or maybe they dug for water and had some water so they could demonstrate, not such a big deal. We can do that. Because that ultimately, the context of the story is, of course, the hardening of Pharaoh's heart. These one plague after another, he's impressed maybe for about 30 seconds until, he's not impressed anymore. And in this case, the Egyptian magicians demonstrated we can do that trick. And
How do we know? How do we
Okay.
know it was blood exactly? And that's
There
just
you
it.
go. There you go. Because anyone who's had a chemistry set can do the same thing.
Right.
Okay.
Steve, are
You
you
can-
saying Pharaoh was in denial?
Oh. Oh, Larry. You got a lot of groans on that one. Oh, golly. Anyway, but yeah, you can do this. It's not, now this, if held as secret information, would be called as another spell. And it can go back and forth. But just like with the rod and the serpents, it goes beyond. It's not just something that you can do in a small area and convert the water. This covers everything. Okay. And the way I was thinking about this, wouldn't it even be futile to dig your own well? Why wouldn't that be blood also? At the same time, it says all the drinking vessels and all this stuff are in fact also the water has been turned to blood. So even if you get it from a well, or if you doesn't mean if you dig a new well that it will be pure water. And that we can have fun with, thinking about it from the standpoint of the Kabbalists, or from this. Here, I wish Mark was with us, because he would he would be able to go into this in more detail. But a lot of these things, the water and is associated with what should I say? It's associated with the phrase divine flow. Okay, so all the stories looking for water and digging wells go along with the concept of divine flow, and the people who protect it and make sure others can receive it. So so that's what crossed my mind here. Wouldn't this be a futile effort if the people start to go digging for that? In another context, they say that this also was experienced by the Israelites in another commentary. So take your pick. There are a lot of different ideas out there, but the message, I think, is that no matter what the situation, what God can do versus all the magicians is far superior. So any other comments other than that? Ruth Ann, did you have any announcements or anything?
Just that, as far as I know, Saturday Shabbat service is still on for next Saturday morning at 10 o'clock. Rabbi and Marlis have something planned. I'm not privy to exactly what they have planned, but hopefully it will be streamed. Sorry about last night, but it was kind of hard to be in two places at one time.
Understand.
Roseanne,
Yep.
it's going to be, they're going to be doing music from Debbie Friedman.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you, Gail. That was very important.
Yeah. And Rabbi, I couldn't believe it. I'd never heard of Debbie Friedman till I got here.
And as we were talking before, Sisterhood is not going to be having its luncheon. Just as a reminder to those.
Pretty much everything has been canceled through the beginning of February. Canceled or postponed. Like I said, except for next Saturday service, which we will, still be masked and social distanced, and that's and the annual meeting. Right now it's supposed to be hybrid, but I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if it just goes to virtual.
Yeah.
Can I ask you a question to Ruth Ann?
Yeah.
Earlier, well, last year, I should say, for the Rabbi Norman announced that he thought we would have a study on the 10th of January. That's a virtual where the parashah,
Right.
are we, is that still on the schedule?
It's now for the 17th.
Okay.
Okay. And you'll get an invitation. The invite is, well, it may say Beth Shalom Temple Center on it. It may say GVR Forum Club. We have a problem on the 17th that the board has their January study session that morning at 9 o'clock. And I think it's going to be a long one. So I spoke with Les Backey, and he's going to turn on the rabbi's class, and he's going to use his license, which is the GVR Forum Club. So like I said, if he remembers to edit it, it will come from Beth Shalom Temple Center. If he doesn't, it'll be GVR Forum Club, but it's good.
That's good to know. Thank you.
So it'll be at 11 o'clock on the 17th.
Thank you.
Any more announcements? Michael, you have a concert coming up in March, is that right?
So far, yeah, March 20th but because of the way things are
Yeah.
going, thank you. Well, I don't know, I'm preparing for it now, so, it depends on how bad this thing gets and what the temple decides to do.
Right. We'll
But
just
thank you
have to
for-
see what happens.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that, Marty.
You're welcome. You're welcome, Mike.
Yeah, it's really hard to plan stuff if you
Yeah.
need social distancing. Yeah.
One other thing I might add, since you brought that up, Marty, I'm going to continue opening up my home for an hour or so for live music in my home for anyone who would like to have that. Only,
Oh,
of course, with mass and maybe 2 or 3 at a time, and that would be it. And it would be up to them, but I want to offer and share some of that with the temple members.
very good. Thank you.
Nice.
Any other? Well, yes, Joanne.
The one thing I'm missing so much with COVID is the music. It just isn't the same on my radio or my TV. I miss those concerts. So thank you all for continuing, at least telling me it might be possible in my future.
Yeah, you're welcome. So, Michael, see, somebody, this is important. As a matter of fact, it is. Think about we're dealing with too much science, math, politics, the wording of things. I'm going to suggest, Joanne brought something up that triggered this. Play the music in your home. If you're outside walking, look at your environment in detail. Look at every leaf. Look at every bug. Okay. Look at every rock. Yes, Joanne.
And when you come home, sit for a while and
Yes.
re-look at it.
This is, I was leading up to that. You read my mind.
Oh, very good. I read your mind.
But it's important, listen, because all of these art and everything, that's when this is a time with the, I'm going to call it a plague. That's what it is. With the plague, you have to look outside of all of this, and the arts are our way out to keep us surviving.
If I can add one more thing, Marty,
Sure.
you're talking about, now, there's something called music therapy.
Oh, yeah.
Music therapy. And there's nothing like it because, you know, we talk about astrology and astronomy and all of these very, very important things.
Mhm.
But nothing takes the place of particularly live music, especially for older people, because I performed for 10 years at La Posada and all the other retirement communities. Why? Because these people have to have this music as a therapy, especially when I was performing at La Villa. These people, because of their situation, gave me more than I gave them. It was such a strong connection because they would sit there every Tuesday and wait for me, and it was remarkable. And I knew how important it is, but not how the height of importance when these people were there, and their loved ones would come over to me and thank me to no end, and I would tell them, "I thank you." It's just, but that's what Joanne had brought up. Is pardon the expression, struck a chord in me.
I understand. I understand. Well, on that more cheerful, yes, Joanne.
Just one more thing. When my mom was in a nursing home for 8 years and did not know me ever, but I used to even take my songbook and we would sit, especially in the summertime, and swing outside. And she knew all the words to all those songs and she would sing them. And it was wonderful. Thank you.
There
You're
was,
welcome.
there
Say
was
what you-
there was one skit that I did at La Villa, where La Villa, for those who are not familiar, it's a memory care facility. People are suffering from Alzheimer's.
Yes.
So it was one particular thing that I'll never forget that I did. And I would stand in front of all these, the audience of, unfortunately, so many people who are suffering from this terrible situation. And I would tell them that we're going to create a beautiful rainbow, and we're going to place our own favorite colors in the rainbow. And so I sat down and placed Somewhere Over the Rainbow. And so they just got a kick out of that. And that's just one of the things that I did, I would share with you. Thank you, Mark.
Well done. Well
Thank
done.
you.
Well, on that note, have a much better week. Okay, God willing, it will be. And enjoy whatever. Okay.